So, with the housekeeping out of the way, let's go ahead and get started. So, um, Isaac, Simon, to help provide some background and context to those joining us, please, would you answer what made you decide to create an online community for veterans in the first place? Simon, feel free to start.
Sure. Thanks very much, Amber. So yeah, I'm the community manager for the Rifles, which is the largest infantry regiment in the British Army, and it has 5 battalions of full-time soldiers and 3 battalions of reserve soldiers. So our community is for them, but also for the very many veterans of our regiment over the years, some 50,000 people in total. And why did we start having a community? Well, it was because we understood that we needed some place to meet that was separate from the workplace, but it represented a home for the family. And that family is a regiment. The British Army is very organized around regimental systems. And so it made a lot of sense to bring that into the 21st century. And, for us, often the people that leave, and they leave full-time employment with British Army, with the regiment, and they find themselves at a loss a little bit because they used to belong to an organization and they no longer do. And our government health service, called the National Health Service here in the UK, calls it thwarted belongingness, where suddenly they drop in connectivity with their old family. And so the community was an attempt to help build a little bit of that belongingness back.
That's amazing. Um, and because I feel like so many, it's it must be particularly that sense of kind of thwarted belongingness. I'm sure, especially when you've literally been involved in armed conflict, can be very, yeah, very shaking. And having wanting to maintain that kind of connection. So yeah, that's incredible. Isaac, please.
Yeah, happy to answer as well. So from our perspective, the coming from the Naval Academy, we have all of our alumni that we're currently trying to serve, both active duty and veterans.
Mhm.
And so they're spread throughout at their different duty stations in Norfolk, San Diego, some stations in Texas, and all everywhere else. But we saw that, as they went out and built these chapters, that we were losing sight of them and that we were losing that sense of connection and community with them. They would go and they'd be doing their individual things out there, and slowly and surely they'd start to dwindle away, or they would start to form their own little clubs. And so we wanted to see that no longer an issue and see it kind of unified in one location. We decided to go and make a platform, which kind of that shared sense of, like,
Sorry, Isaac, you're going in and out a bit.
oh, audio doing that thing again. That should be a little bit better there.
Yeah,
Uh,
thank you.
yeah, so we wanted to give them that sense of belonging in one location, something that would let them feel that they were still connected not only to their local veterans and their local active duty service members, but also to the greater alumni community. And so, and really the veteran community, because a lot of the times the topics that they talk about, obviously online, are related to their current active duty life or their veteran life. So we stood up the platform, gave them still those individual pages, but we really brought them under the one kind of community fold there, really to serve that purpose of just giving them that sense of shared belonging and not disjointedness from being in those separate chapters all throughout the world.
So it sounds like for both communities, the goal was kind of to fill in that gap where that, to use the term thwarted belongingness was, to ensure that there was that connection to help support veterans and alumni and ensure that they felt seen, heard, and connected. Um, So obviously, in both these cases, your veteran communities have a number of similarities. But I know that in both cases, they also have their own unique differences. that make them special. So, Isaac, would you mind elaborating for me an example of when your community is really working? What does that look like in real life for a veteran or a member of your community?
Yeah. So for us, we, like I mentioned, we wanted to give them that shared sense of belonging once again, that, hey, you may be a veteran out in Colorado Springs or out in South Carolina, actually, is a great example, but we still have a community here for you everywhere, wherever our veterans are, wherever our active duty service members are, wherever our alumni are, really, hey, you have community there. And so we actually had a great example of it working perfectly where one of our veterans, one of our older alumni, actually, I think it was from the class of 70s or so, needed to get a heart transplant for congestive heart failure. And the issue for them was that they were in South Carolina. They needed to make it up to Minnesota, and they needed to stay there for some time and have some transportation up there. But they had one family car. And we saw them reach out on the platform. I think it was the coolest thing to watch in real time as they said, hey, I'm looking for a way to get up there. Can anybody help me out? And you saw one chapter from South Carolina spread that to the next chapter. And it kept on going until there was an idea of, hey, maybe we make like a little caravan or pass them along. And then eventually someone came forward from further up, somewhere in the upper Midwest, and actually provided that car for that vet to get up to Minnesota for a heart transplant. And it was incredible to watch because you saw what would happen typically in real life where the community reaches out to each other and says, hey, we have a need. Someone is vulnerable and sharing that need and it actually being fulfilled. I think that was one of the coolest experiences of watching it actually happen in real time, the sense of community really coming alive there.
I also love that example because it demonstrates, these are digital communities, but they have real world, real life impacts, and that's an example of that. And so I love that example. So thank you for sharing. It's really beautiful. And it helps to, helps to also clarify the importance of these communities as well, because obviously
Right,
they're really actually helping actual people,
right. These are real
veterans
vets out
who,
there, real active duty members who
exactly,
need that kind of community.
exactly. Okay, so turning to you, Simon, I know Hivebrite has shared a long and collaborative partnership with the Rifles, and I know because I've worked with you myself as an account manager in the past, um, and I've been fortunate enough to witness the maturity and evolution of Swift over the years. So, may I ask you what surprised you the most once you started actually talking to members and hearing what they need?
Yeah, and you're right in thinking that we hadn't anticipated fully how the community might work, and I think it is really important in my mind to stress for people how much it is a marathon rather than a sprint. You
Mm,
know that you fall over yourself, launch these things, and think, well, in the first 3 months it must succeed or it won't. I think you've got to listen to your veterans and your members, whoever they are, and also change as you sense the demand shift, or indeed you didn't really get the demand picture right in your head, and you need to be humble enough to change that. I think our community has really um, has really worked in helping. We have a number of our veterans with mental health problems. We lost over 60 dead in Afghanistan and with over 300 serious loss limb injuries. We have campaigns going back further, Northern Ireland and others. And actually what Swift has allowed us to do is to reach people that we might not otherwise have reached,
right.
and allow them to talk in the way that they want to talk, to riflemen. And I'm sure Isaac would agree that there is a very strong sense of esprit de corps, whichever unit of the military you're in, it's always the finest in the world. And that is no different with the rifles. And it also allows these mostly men to talk in the way that they want to talk about things that are really very, very difficult. Sometimes that doesn't appear to be terribly respectful. Veterans speak to each other in ways that might, to outsiders, seem very heartless. Um, but that is their way of coping. And it is crucially very different from the way that they might behave on a global social network, which isn't theirs. And they're not convinced that their audience is simply their own family.
Right.
And, so it's allowed our riflemen to talk and to connect and to throw jibes at each other because that's the way they are. But it's also in connection with your guys who've done brilliant work. We've successfully rolled out an early warning system on Swift to try and catch suicides before they take place, and it's been invaluable in providing an early warning system. We have a quick reaction force of 10 in this country, and we have riflemen all around the world, and we have Swift allows us to coordinate a network of riflemen to get to people quickly before they do something that we is just tragic. And we absolutely can't claim that we've been 100% successful. And every time we fail, and we failed last week, it is desperately sad. But we know that Swift operates, number one, as that vital network that people can cry for help in. Number two, they can press the button in Swift, Hivebrite app, to call for help or call for a family help. But number three, the data that Hivebrite generates, because it's curated by the riflemen themselves, we then use in AI apps to try and find networks in emergencies that the rifleman would have served in Afghan with, and so on. And we can get amongst that network quickly. And Swift is invaluable to provide us with that very high quality digital exhaust. So it's important in lots of different ways.
I was still working with you when the day you launched that on Swift, and I remember that was a really powerful day, and I thought, okay, this is why I do the job I do. So, yeah, and I remember telling everybody on the team about it as well, because it's really powerful. Um, so, Isaac, within the makeup of my USNA, there are those in your community, they vary amongst kind of ages, kind of what we're talking about in terms of people, how people identify with one another. They vary amongst ages, genders, and affiliations to the U.S. Naval Academy. Um, so in terms of navigating kind of all these different types of stakeholders within your community, and the various identities that are also within this community, how do you ensure that, in terms of ensuring that this feels like a cohesive community, even though you have a variety of different types of individuals in it? Um, this leads me to ask you, okay, so veterans aren't the one single group within your community. So how do you make all these different people feel like, yep, this is the community for me?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a little tough because we do have a bit differently. We have parents on the site as well as alumni slash
Right,
veterans, and then you also have a whole different range of alumni. Somebody from the class of 70s who's experiencing impacts from, or excuse me, from the class of 60s who's impacted by Agent Orange, or some other type of medical illness is going to have a very different experience from someone from the class of 20 who just graduated recently and is out there looking for advice on their aviation career. I
right,
think that we really found a lot of use in giving them their groups as a space, and especially the vets and the active duty. They have a sense of connection to those who are within, I mean, their age range, their year, really. And we like to kind of really lean into that because they feel the most comfortable with those people. These are
Mhm.
the people that you went through 4 years by the Severn, as they like to say, really learning hard knocks and before going off into the bigger fleet or Marine Corps to then learn even more about the world. And so I think leaning into their classes, leaning into those groups is really easy for us to do, but also to give them that sense of belonging. We do what the chapters do, what those regionally out there do on an online scale. So when they have their get-togethers every month and they say, hey, this person just got promoted to admiral, they're the first of their class, everybody give them a big hand of applause. Like we like to do the same thing on the site. We like to show them, hey, we see you out there. We also have a reward. We have an award that we have on the site for the oldest salty dog, I believe it is, the oldest admiral. That's passed off from them to the next oldest whenever they retire. And fun traditions like that where we can really celebrate them on the site in the same way they would be celebrated in person. Bravo Zulus, we call them BZs, and we do that as well for the sadder stuff as well. When they have people, when they have classmates, when they have friends pass away, it's good for us to be able to put the obituary on their site and to see them kind of get together and to know at least, hey, and be informed so they're not finding out in some other awful way. And they get to find out with their classmates, with their people that they feel a sense of belonging with. I
Right.
think that really helps them to feel like, hey, this is my location, like this is my spot, this is my home. Hopefully, if not at least my home, hey, hopefully they feel like this is my community, that these are the folks that I can celebrate with, that I can mourn with, that really see me and I can see them.
I love how you use the words home, family, because, in both listening to you and Simon. Now, I know, Isaac, you literally have family members that are on your, which probably on both, actually, literally have family members. Um, but I get the sense from both of you that there is very much it's veteran communities do have this sense of family, of shared traditions, of speaking the same kind of language, because they have these shared experiences. Even if they're, as you said, based on age, it might be a slightly different experience. Still, there are these kind of ties that keep them together that feel very family oriented. And I feel like in terms of your communities, that's the power of these communities because they feel very family oriented. Um, um, so, and considering that, and because, you know, a, something that we're always trying to achieve with communities in general, not just veteran communities, but all those that we would refer to as communities, is this sense of value and belonging. And I would think particularly with veterans communities, as you've both spoken about, they can be, and as we see in families, when we've been around the table at family functions, sometimes things can get a bit heated, as we all know. So, it can become really sensitive, and even really personal, because of, or maybe the better word is vulnerable, within these communities and within these spaces. So, how do you create, and you kind of spoke to this, but can you just elaborate further for me how you create these kind of create this sense of safety and respect, especially when topics get heavy? And as you mentioned, Simon, because sometimes the language that's used is particular to these veterans communities. So, how do you create the kind of sense of safety?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think the interesting thing that we find with our riflemen is if they are struggling, it's often through a loss of mission.
Mm.
And servicemen, I suspect the world over, US Navy, and everything else are people who are mission oriented. By definition, that's what often attracts them to these communities. And sometimes, as people leave the service, they become they drift, and there's a lack of that sense. So, in a way, the safety is in, we talk about them grabbing them by the nose ring, which sounds rather heartless, but the point we're making is that actually, we can use these communities to help redefine their sense of mission. We had a corporal, so that's someone who's done 7 or so years, very successfully commanded a group of armored infantry carriers, so we call warriors, is like US Bradley vehicles, and he really capable and a real mission, and he became a school caretaker in the northeast of England, and wrote on our community, gosh, I commanded a section of warriors, and now and now I'm painting walls, and actually I think it was great that he was able to articulate that, and also it was great the response he got, which was, well, the school should be flipping, excuse my French, very pleased that they've got you as their caretaker, and just think how important your job is for the next generation, and make sure you impart the values that and I think what we find is often that the arguments they're not personal. And again, because mission oriented people are typically people that argue around the mission, and don't argue against each other. And so what we find is actually that when people can come together, we call it pulling up a sandbag, which is really when you sit down, virtually or physically, because of course the community allows for these virtual sit downs, and it also allows for the physical ones, where you can pull up a sandbag and just talk about that time when you were a little bit up the creek, as they say, somewhere, and very, very frightened together, and you pulled through, and it's that sort of thing that it's impossible to do with anyone else, because those feelings of fear, and in my small way, I'm certainly I was a veteran of 10 years service. I did my active service, and on occasions I was terrified, but I was terrified together with a group of people who I'll never forget that link, the communities allow us to keep those links going, and it brings some meaning and some mission into people's lives, and that's often the underlying reason why they're struggling mentally.
Yeah. It's, you said, when you use the word adrift, the word structure came to my mind. And I know within communities, part of what you're doing is you're creating a structure for people to be able to interact, for them to be able to participate, maybe join some activities. So it sounds like that adrift, what the community is creating is the structure for those who are adrift, so that they can, as you say, find their mission, find their connection, find their support. And that is, again, that's a power of SWIFT and other veteran communities, like my USNA. So I would love to hear your thoughts on that as well, Isaac.
Yeah, I mean, very similar to Simon. I think he puts it into better words, though. As I was thinking about it, it's like he mentions, we have a lot of people who are feeling like they should be in charge of something, feeling like they've gone from having responsibility to potentially not, and some who are still in the midst of having responsibility. And I think that we find kind of a happy medium between those folks, those active duty members and the veterans of there's good links that they can be making with each other, and that they do really make, especially at the local level. But we see it still bubbling up to the online level more. And we could probably do more to encourage it, but it looks a lot like somebody from the old aviation age of the 80s teaching this, more recent, maybe class of 15 or so, recent test pilot who just got into school, just showing them, hey, that sense of esprit de corps, as we mentioned earlier. You're an aviator now, like you come from a long line of folks who have taken to the skies, and that goes the same for our surface community and our submarine community, and for all the parents who support it too. It's actually it really draws in the parents, which is really great to see, because they are obviously some of the biggest supporters of this next generation. So I think giving them that platform, that ability to speak into the ear of the younger generations or to hear from the older generations of, hey, what is it I should be looking out for? What is it I should be doing? What should I be making the most of? And especially of legacy. We don't talk a lot about it out loud, but really that sense of pride that you're continuing on something great. Um, I think that really encourages them to have that sense of I call it almost unity. Maybe there's a better word for it, but community, especially for their specific service field and on the platform. And that's kind of what helps to also bring people together through groups, which is really nice. So it's not just that you're on your class page or your local page, but hey, that you're also talking to others who are of the same experience as you. Even if it is separated by a few years, there's still so much to be gained from that they find.
Yeah, and I would, again, going back to this sense of family, for veterans, for alumni, and for their family members, parents, being a parent myself, I know how, and it's also students, correct? You also
Right.
have,
We
right.
have the students together. Mhm.
Exactly. I could understand how it could be very nerve-wracking. My sister was in the army, and I remember how nerve-wracking it was for my mother. And so being able to have this space where you can meet other parents who also have students, along with veterans and alumni who are thriving, and be able to get that sense of, okay, this is going to be okay.
Right. We almost bring
Um,
the parents into that kind of veteran community to show them
exactly.
like, hey, they're getting raised into something good here. Like,
Exactly.
your anxieties are reasonable, but like the end result is something great that you can see throughout there. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Um, So, with that in mind, because obviously that is a process, right? So, in order to get your members to a place where can feel that kind of, where they can be vulnerable in that way, where they can make those connections, and they're not, kind of intimidated, because obviously, anytime you're coming into a new space. Especially when you're talking about community, community is something you build. And so when you're new to a community, it can be intimidating, especially when it is online and you have to get comfortable with this space. And again, we've talked about a wide range of ages. Some maybe who are younger are far more comfortable with these digital spaces. Those who are older, maybe not. So what do you do to welcome someone so that they don't show up once and then just disappear?
Yeah. I'd love to answer on this one first because I we we have a lot of folks who do wind up, like our 80-year-olds and so vets who turn on their account and then they take a look around and then they're like, all right, what do I do now? And I think we have a good success of it's kind of a mix of, you're coming from this, like we talked about earlier, the sense of, mission-driven purpose. And so I
Right.
think it's about empowering them to find their place in the community. It's telling them if you want to have a part in all of this, volunteer. And we see a lot of our older folks actually because they feel this sense of I want to do something, but I'm not sure what to do. They do volunteer. They sign up for their local chapter to be the treasurer, or they sign up to be the person to really rally the troops and get them together at the next event. And so for those who are really saying, I need something to do, we try and we provide them that. And for some of them, it's really just that they want to be heard.
Yeah.
And so they get onto the site and they're really looking for ears to listen to them. And that's no problem too. It's great for them to be able to share those what we call C stories with each other and to really just kind of ramble and rant about them. And sometimes they send in these stories as well, and we like to capture them to then share more broadly, like to share with the community because they've got good stories to share. Like they have incredible stories from the Vietnam era and from Korean era and from other generations that we don't want to lose. So we really capture those on there and really share it with the other groups. Um, so empowering, giving them that kind of space to listen and to share. I think that's kind of how we get them onto the site first without, we get them onto the site and then keep them onto the site without them first saying like, I don't know what to do next. I'm gonna hop out. They can see that, hey, these are the stories that are being shared and I have an opportunity to build into this. It's kind of what we give them.
It sounds kind of like what Simon was saying when we were, talking about structure. You're providing the structure
Yeah.
for them to be able to participate, and you make that very clear from, as they first come on, so that they find kind of their place within it.
Right. That's a good
Yeah.
way to put it.
Simon, did you
I think for us, it's in the way that Hivebrite allows you to create groups. And
Mm.
I think the interesting thing there is that the group, you could organize it completely around subunit, the first battalion, the rifles, the
Right.
whatever. And we have those. But I think there's also the regional affinity groups, the
Yeah.
chapters that Isaac was talking about. That we like I'm sure in the US, there's a very strong regional pride. So Geordies, who are Englishmen that come from around the Newcastle area, or Cornishmen who would say they're probably not Englishmen at all, have their own set of values, and so it's important that the community construct, the taxonomy, if you like, the way that you construct your groups reflects those pools of affinity that, and you might, for instance, have sport. So, historically it was sort of golf and cricket. I know that sounds a bit weird, but those sorts of games, people will then connect. And what's so lovely about that is that you've got connections from an 80-year-old to a 20-year-old. But the glue, if you like, is the activity and the sport, and that's the way that we try to do it. But I think one shouldn't underestimate for veterans the attractiveness of having a network rather than being on the receiving end of a loud hailer message from a general or an admiral. Or the military is, you do spend your life being shouted at a little bit. So the value in saying to every single one of the network, from the very senior people, and we're lucky enough to have some very senior soldiers in our regiment, to the newest recruit, that their voice is equal, and I think that's super important. There are times for orders, but there are also times for mutual respect, and whatever rank you are, it makes no difference. And I'm sure it's the same with Isaac.
It is. That's great that you point that out, Simon. I'm realizing now how many of the great interactions happen. In fact, one of our chapter presidents who discovered the chapter through the website, greatly enough, is actually from the class of 22. So he is probably about 26 or 27 right now, leading a chapter full of about 50 or so folks I know who are mostly of the older generation, some of these people who were commanders of ships and whatnot. And yet he's telling them, hey, make sure you show up and actually sign up for your membership because we're, we're doing our dues right now. Like, it's great to see them connecting at that level, being able to tell from lowly lieutenant to high up admiral, hey, I need you to, I need you to check in here. It's good to see.
It's amazing the opportunity that, through this community, they can take that leadership role.
Right, right. It's really cool to
They
see.
can step into those shoes.
Absolutely.
Um, so Simon, you've had lots of powerful examples, which we've talked about over the course of this discussion of how Swift has been able to serve its veterans. You've talked about how Swift has been able to serve its veterans in some of their darkest moments, which is, which is wonderful to hear. And it's really because I know that some of these stories can be quite heartbreaking. So would you mind sharing, just elaborating on a story from your community where through it someone was able to, um, sorry, I'm not phrasing this correctly, but where they came through for someone and something that you still think about today. I mean, you've shared a lot with us, but I would love to just hear a bit more.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that there are a number, and you can imagine, each episode is intensely personal and private for the individual, who in most cases is still um, uh, uh, in a place of need. The problem with mental health, if in that case, it's different from a broken leg.
Yeah.
You can put a leg in a splint and do rehab, and off you go. But
Yeah.
those issues, where sometimes it's anniversary driven,
Mm.
where we had some bad, difficult times in Afghanistan, and what we've identified are hotspots dates where and those groups that need leaning into, you know, and Swift is really helpful for that. But you know, specifically, we have about two-thirds of our warnings come from third parties rather than the person themselves. You know, and often that's because the person themselves have gone dark, quiet, and we've had warnings, but we've had situations where we've broken into hotel rooms to recover people who have overdosed, and we've managed to get them very urgent medical treatment quickly. We've extracted at least one rifleman from the corner of a railway platform, you know, who wanted to end it there. So you know, but we failed on a number of occasions, and you know what we understand is that we've got to keep learning,
Yeah.
and we've got to recognize that for everyone that we succeed, you know, the ones that fail, we need to think, was there anything that we could do to improve the offer of Swift so that actually that person never gets to the point, you know, can we, and also was there something that we missed, you know, in terms of activity and monitoring, always understanding, of course, that we don't live in a police state, and that people are perfectly entitled to live their own lives, even if it ends tragically. We've got to strike a careful balance. But you know, we got to a stage, I think 4 or 5 years ago, when we just kept having suicides, and we said to ourselves, well, we must be able to do something better. And bless its cotton socks, bless the NHS, our National Health Service, has got some really good practitioners, but you know, the nature of the beast, it takes about 2 weeks to click those very critical mental health services into gear, and we absolutely understand why that is the case. So you know, we decided to build our own program called Always a Rifleman program, and Swift is such a crucial, it's not the only part, but it is a crucial element of that, acting as the flypaper, effectively gathering people in and allowing us to create a situation where people can warn us, if you know, it's an easy way of doing that. And we look back and think, well, were it not for Swift, we would have lost a number more. So you know, that's a reason to be to be grateful, I suppose. Pride is not what we not the emotion we have, but we feel that even if we haven't got all the answers, we are asking the right questions.
Right. You've talked about the power of the bugle in the past for the riflemen. So sounding the bugle.
Yep. Yeah,
Yeah.
well, and of course, we have an awkward shared history with the US, in the sense that we were in combat on the mainland of the US in the 1814 war, and our world revolved around the bugle rather than the drum. And for those of you who know shots, rifles, riflemen were dispersed with these things called rifles rather than muskets, and they needed a way of transmitting information. So we used the bugle and specific calls. And if you look at our regimental badge today, that is the bugle. And we still use it, and it's the most brilliant way of getting a message across camp. But you need to know what each bugle call is. And funnily enough, Swift Hivebrite is the most brilliant way of doing that, because we can put all of those bugle calls in recordings on the system. So our young riflemen, when they first join, it is an invaluable tool, which of course is what you want out of a community initially, that they can then learn their bugle calls. So that when someone says you've got to fall into the main square for parade, the young rifleman doesn't get left behind.
I think in this particular case, especially with the kind of the story that you were sharing, it's really powerful. Um, I was also thinking, as you were talking, I was thinking about the importance, and I think this is a learning for us all, the importance of one, knowing your community. Um, as you described, both of you have described, you really need to know your community. Um, and, you know, as you were speaking, Simon, you're talking about situations that are literally life and death. Um, and I know that not every community who, and kind of community manager who's joining us right now, it's not necessarily a life or death situation. But again, when we're talking about community, um, it's about not only knowing your community, but as you have said, learning from it and never giving up, saying, oh, okay, well, this doesn't work, so forget it. But saying, okay, so that didn't go well. What can we learn from this situation? Let's ask some questions and let's, try again. That's a part of growth and evolution. So I think that that's a really important point.
Yeah, I've got to agree with that too. I think one of the things that we see in the U.S. with we have our Veterans Affairs, which I'm sure plenty on the call are familiar with how wonderful our Veterans Affairs organization is. They do work extremely hard. They're just under-resourced and all that good stuff. But I think what really impacts our veterans is seeing that, hey, we're still trying to improve for them, that we're still trying to make this a better space for them, that we are not done making this a community for them. And I think that just to add in, that gives a good sense of belonging as well, or at least for myself, from my perspective, that makes me feel warm and fuzzy about the community I'm a part of.
Yeah, I completely agree. Um, okay, so I have a last question for you both. If a veteran group came to you tomorrow or even later today, Isaac, because it's morning for you, and said, we want to do this. Where do we start? What would you tell them? What would you have done differently? Sort of, we were talking about learnings. What would you have done differently looking back?
Uh, I think, if you don't mind, Simon, yeah, we had a tough rollout where we kind of we had a lot of control over the community, and we said, here's what you've got, here's what you can do, now do it. And I think some of our leaders kind of raised their hackles at that and they said, hey, that doesn't sound right to me. I'm used to being the leader of my group and being the one who joins us together. And so I think one thing we would go back and change is that now talking about improvement and talking about trying to generally improve for our vets and our active duty, um, we try and give the space to them to say that, hey, this is yours to take charge of. Kind of talking about that empowering our older leaders, but really just empowering all of our leaders to say, like, you have the you have the ship, like this is yours now, this is yours to drive where it needs to go. Here's your left and right limits, don't break those, but also this is for you to control. And it's incredible how much of a switch that is from saying here's what you can use and here's how you can use it to be creative and go out and do. They have this much greater sense of course, belonging, yes, but also of empowerment. That this is their community, this is their section of the community to bring into the greater community and for them to lead. And so those volunteer leaders really empowering them, really telling them, hey, you have the creativity, but also here's where you should be careful. Here's the shallow waters, giving them that kind of guidance ahead of time. I think that really would have made a big difference for us starting out. But now it at least it shows its payoff and dividends by them really creating some impressive different ways to use the platform that I never would have thought of before. Using it for a shop, using it for their officer notes, all kinds of different things. So yeah, empowering them to be creative really and to give them as much freedom as we could without breaking too many guidelines was really what we would change up.
I love that. I love when you actually learn new things from your community.
Right. They are some smart people out there.
Simon, did you want to respond?
Yeah, I think I'd start making sure that my expectations and others around in the wider organization, because let's face it, that's where community managers, that's the context of a community manager, that they've got a wider organization to convince. And I think the expectations I found were that people felt that we were trying to build something that was an alternative to Facebook. And what that meant was, oh gosh, eyeballs, they've got to be on the platform all the time. And I think what's really important is that that's not what we were, that's not what it's for. And and one's got to understand if you're using metrics, the Sloan School of Management, using metrics to measure it. Don't try not to measure it on the basis of, how often people go on or whatever. Is actually to understand that it is a marathon, not a sprint, and
Yeah.
that it is right that our community, and of course I speak for myself, it is right that we have our own digital home, not least for the sense of credibility with the youngsters. For them it's bewildering that we wouldn't. And the fact that we sit next to Taylor Swift's app on the App Store is something of great pride to the young Geordies that we have. But that is a really important point. And we make sure that it's useful to them, even if it's not something they go to every day. If they want to find something, they want a bugle call, or they want to find an event, they want to find a promotion, well, who's been promoted. So we typically put it straight through Swift, and that's important to that serving community. Or they, sadly, the other end. So we put our obituaries, and I think Isaac said the same thing. And that's really important because, towards my end, dare I say it, people are. You think, oh gosh, I remember I served with them. So and it becomes a place where people go for need, and we shouldn't worry too much about that. And we're not trying to compete with with Meta or whoever it happens to be. It occupies a different thing, and making sure that your wider stakeholders, when you start the process of saying, well, we need a community, is to make sure they understand that, so that 3 months in, as it's gently getting gaining speed and everything else, that people aren't going, well, that didn't work. It hasn't created a buzz, and I think that's a really important element.
I think that that's a really important point. Setting expectations, particularly for the wider stakeholders, because how a successful community, it has to go through a certain process. As we say, you build community. Building community means that it's not going to happen over the course of a month. You got to build it. It takes time. And so, as you say, it's a marathon. So yeah, thank you for that, because I think that's a really, really important point, Simon, both for veteran communities and for all communities. Um, so we are actually less than 15 minutes now. I lied. I apologize. So let's go ahead and turn to our audience for some questions. We won't be able to cover all of them. I'm sorry, but we will be able to at least address a few. Okay, so um, this is a really good one. How do you turn members into contributors without burning out the same small group of volunteers? I'll put that one to Isaac, to you.
Sure. Yeah, I think this is a great question because a lot of times you'll see the same people who are engaging on the platform, and it's a lot of times it is the volunteer leaders who are saying, hey, sign up for this event, come to this, and they're putting in the work, and it's really tough, especially to ask any more out of them. I made the mistake actually in our uh, group of admins. I saw our most engaged admin, actually, the one who does the most. I asked them, hey, could you make some guides for us to, share with others? And of course, they were like, hey, I just don't have the time for it. And so instead, what I realized was I kind of look for those who are engaged, but really just kind of they're watching or they're signing up for the events and they go to the events, but they don't really participate. And so I really encourage those small group volunteers. This usually looks like groups of about 30 or so, where the one or two people are very engaged. I ask them, hey, the next person who goes to the event, have them take the photos, have them post it on the site. Hey, that person who's been liking those posts, maybe tag them, ask them, hey, what is it that they're so interested in? And so trying to teach those ones who are so engaged to then engage the next person over. It's not the first follower who's the most important, as they say, it's the second follower who's the most important. And so getting them to kind of rally up the community. It's not just them speaking into the void, it's them inviting them to actually participate. Uh, it's almost a skill to teach them. I feel like in a way we're teaching all of our volunteers to be mini community managers, but it's definitely an important skill for them to have.
We definitely talk a lot with the various communities we work with about champions and how to
Yeah,
cultivate your champions. And
right.
it's exactly what you're talking about. You do see that is very like I worked in higher education and with an alumni community for 10 years, and that's exactly what we tried to do
Right.
on a daily basis, basically.
It's tough. It's tough, but it's good work. And you can see it when it's successful too, because then, hey, those people who have engaged, like if they were just liking posts at first and then they get, kind of called out to post something, now suddenly they're much more comfortable and you'll see them start to get more engaged because, hey, they've made their first post, they've created their first event, whatever it is that got them out of their shell. Yeah.
That it's similar to another question I see here, which you might want to respond to, Simon. If you could say something to a veteran that has joined but not said anything or contributed yet, what would that be?
I I think I would ask them,
Hmm,
what is it that you're looking to gain from the community? And as I said, we weren't perfect in understanding what the demand might be, not
right,
least because we were doing this for the first time.
right.
And in my experience, anyway, our experience is often the quietest riflemen who speak the most sense. Um, and the opposite is also true. And so I would ask, but I think again it gets back to that point of of recognizing that for some, simply imbibing their old world is what they are looking to do. And people are naturally different. Some more sort of vocal than others. Some are, are for a variety of reasons just recovering from things, and they just need to drink the Kool-Aid, as you might say, on the other side of the pond. And I think we should be fine with that. I mean, and what I've discovered, certainly the way Hivebrite tools, where you have a kind of semi-admin status, so you as a user can, and we've very aggressively exposed those bits of it so that you can create an event and so on. And the advice I would say to community managers, there's always a temptation to sort of worry about spelling mistakes and English, or you've got something that's sitting in the wall it's got an obvious kind of typo or whatever. Well, don't worry, because actually, you know that person may have had to pluck up a lot of courage to put something on, and the last thing they need is some lecture from someone about something that really doesn't matter. And so I think that's I sort of slight segue, but I wouldn't worry too much about those that are passively improving from just imbibing again in our world.
I think that's a great answer. That if they speak up and they're sharing their voice, that's enough. It doesn't have to be perfect. Progress,
Sure.
not perfection.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so I see we don't, I'm going to ask one more question. So my apologies to those whose questions I don't get to, because there are a couple. But I'll ask one more question. Um, did you make any decisions early on that you realized were wrong? If yes, how did you fix it?
I think for us, the easy answer, well, there's the easy answer of we had way too much control over a bunch of admirals and captains and people who are typically used to controlling their own groups, and that instead it was better to empower and let them to be creative. But also, I think another mistake that we made was we started off with a lot of our groups closed,
Mm,
which seems like a small thing. Maybe not because you still have the live feed, but really, I think when it came to classes, they had private matters to discuss with each other. But when it came to other groups, really they wanted a sense of invitement, they want or invitement, being invited. They really wanted to feel like, oh, this is open to me. This is something I can go peek into. And if I'm interested, if I'm, wanting to be part of this shared interest group that I can just hop right in and be a part of that community. I think keeping all the doors open almost in a way was something that, or almost all of the doors open, is something we would probably have done a little bit differently if we went back.
That makes sense.
And I think for us, we didn't have enough scope to add admins. I think you do where um, we actually have a very powerful network in the UK and globally that was doing its great work in analog form. And actually, the power of Hivebrite is that it allows that to be digitized, but you need enough scope to add admins, and we didn't have enough of those, and we corrected that later. And I mean, what's interesting is, we would absolutely never be able to fulfill, our senior general, called a colonel commandant, bizarrely, who defines the aims of the regiment. There's absolutely no way that we could fulfill his direction without Hivebrite, because it's a massive force multiplier for us in that sense. So we kind of, I didn't quite think that through enough, and we've changed that.
Well, thank you for sharing your learnings. Thank you for everything that, for this conversation. It's been really wonderful. Um, I appreciate all the work both of you have done and how you've helped to bring these communities to fruition. It's obvious the power that they're having. So thank you, and thank you for sharing. I really appreciate you being here today.
Thanks for having us,
Um,
Amber.
we're going to wrap up. Again, I apologize to those whose questions I did not get to. Um, for a few quick things for our audience. First, we'll be sending you the recording of today's webinar along with some bonus resources via email, so keep an eye out for that. If you have any questions that didn't get answered, then just hit reply on the email and we will get back to you. We'd also love to hear your thoughts on today's session. Your feedback helps us with these webinars to make them better, so don't hesitate to share what you think. And then finally, to all our Hivebrite customers joining us today, we've dropped a link in the chat to our exclusive customer community. So if you're not part of the Hivebrite community, we'd love to see you there. So please check it out. It's a great place to connect and share experiences. I know I'm on the Hivebrite community, and if you work with me, you've definitely seen the Hivebrite community because I force all of you to look at it. So I personally love it. So many thanks again today, and I hope everybody has a great day, evening, or morning, depending on where you are in the world. So thank you all. Thank you.